Welcome to Proof of Culture. I'm your host, Sean Morrison. Today's guest is Shira Lazar. Shira is a pioneer in digital media and broadcasting. She started her career as a culture reporter for CBS News and has turned that into a successful brand in Web3 called What's Trending. She's currently a highly sought after moderator and keynote speaker in the space. And in this conversation, we talk about Web3, what it really means, not just for content creators, but for the creator economy at large. We discuss how to move past headlines and really get to the core of what the promise of Web3 is. We also discuss alignment and being able to take advantage of opportunities as they arise. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thank you so much. I'm sure you've got tons of people asking you to do tons of things, but you actually are one of my favorite people in this space. So I'm really happy that you are able to make some time just to chat with me. So thank you.
Oh my God, of course. Well, I appreciate you. It's an honor.
So, Shira, tell us about your journey you're from Montreal, which I didn't know that until I started doing some research on you. From Montreal, and now you're kind of like a recognized face here in Web3. Talk to me about your origin story and how you actually went from there to here in Web3.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, my background is in broadcasting and media. I grew up watching Barbara Walters and Oprah and Katie Couric and then Ryan Seacrest. And I loved unscripted content, talk shows and news magazines. So when I came out to LA, coming from Emerson College in Boston and studying media, I wanted to be on air and host and produce unscripted content. I came up at a time where pretty much there was two options. You go up the local news station ladder, covering weird stories like local murders and weather. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or you would audition maybe for E or MTV and get that job. But there weren't a lot of those opportunities, as you can imagine. Digital wasn't even really a thing yet. But as I was doing my video reel at the time, because you would create a fake video pretending to do all these things like interviews on the red carpet, or you would go to a Hollywood Walk of Fame and interview people pretending you were on some sort of show.
Okay, well, wait.
Together the video.
Tell me about one of those that you did, because I'd love to hear how.
No, I mean, if you go back, it's so cringy. The process was, in order to get an agent, you had to have a reel, which now you have to have a sizzle reel as well. Sure. But digital wasn't around. So you would have a VHS and you would send it out to all the agencies, and you would either hand deliver it or mail it and then call them to ping them. I don't even think we were really emailing. Maybe we were starting to. Feels like I'm aging myself.
I know. How old is
Yeah, it's great. I'm 40. So I came here at 21.
You're not that old. Come on.
I appreciate that. In 2011. Now I'm losing it. I came here in 2004. 2011 is when I started What's Trending.
2004 and 2011.
I'm messing the decades. Starting now, I'm showing how old I am, but 2004. So it was a really interesting time. And I ended up getting an agent through literally creating a video that was fake. Like, I would pretend I was on a show. So I'd be like, Shira Lazar reporting live from Hollywood. And then you would edit up like a montage of you doing man on the street or person on the street interviews. And, or I would stop into some sort of event and act like I was working for some sort of network, right? So I'd be like, we're on the red carpet interviewing blah, 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 and maybe it was from actual jobs, or maybe it was from just like, I was faking it, right? And then you were showing your skills and your talent, and that would get you maybe your first job, or at least an audition for your first job. And so that's how it all began. And I started getting asked to do red carpet interviews and hosting for companies, but specifically my first opportunities were for websites that were starting to do online video, specifically Wire Image, which is one of the biggest photo agencies in the world that got bought by Getty Images. They were launching their entertainment news video division, and it was very innovative at the time to be able to have an entertainment event and right away within hour or two upload videos of those interviews that the press would be able to pick up from. So I was working for them doing that. So I was getting all this experience, and I was at a part of the red carpet, like the ends. It was digital was always at the ends because it was less audience, less glamorous, I guess, less important. And so we had a lot of time to get to know each other, all of us. We'd hang out, we'd schmooze. So I started meeting everyone that had websites and digital companies. And so I started making my rounds and becoming the go-to on-air host for everyone who had digital in LA. Basically, if you had a website, if you had a digital company and you needed video, I was your person. As a on-air personality, as a producer, like I just knew how to work with entrepreneurs and startup founders and do really awesome video because I was taking the skills I had with traditional media and bringing it to them. That led me then into more of the culture around tech. And so from a job just doing a info video for a startup, Jason Lazar, I'll give him a shout out. He invited me at the time to TechCrunch. At this, I didn't even know what TechCrunch was. Michael Arrington had founded it. This was the heyday, right? So he invited me to like TechCrunch 50 or something. It was like the annual cocktail party gathering, invite only. And I was probably one of the only LA people there. They were like, what is an LA person doing in San Francisco? It was really rare. And I said, well, I'm doing videos for websites. And at the time I had my phone, which was a Nokia N95 phone, not even an iPhone. iPhones weren't yet here really in that way. So again, aging myself. And I would be doing videos on the go on my phone because Nokia was at the time the only one that would allow you to upload right directly to your website, which I thought was really cool at the time. It was really next level. And so I would just upload videos on the go, what we call vlogging now, to my website on like a player for a company that's probably not even around anymore, to be honest. And so I told them that. And so I started to get to know the Silicon Valley scene. And then again, it was a very interesting moment in time where LA and Silicon Valley were coming together. Ashton Kutcher was on a site that was just starting up called Twitter, trying to hit 1 million followers against Larry King. And somehow I connected to him and that community. And, you know, it was this moment where people in Hollywood that knew about the startup scene started to build their own kind of bubble here in LA. And so a lot of us, like it wasn't even Silicon Beach yet. That's what they call it now. But it was like the tech scene in Los Angeles. And so a lot of us came to know each other. And you could say that led into, it was like the end of Web 1 into, you know, what would be Web 2. And then what I started noticing is through doing my videos on my own on this Nokia phone and getting invited to the Webby Awards Summit at the time, it was this exclusive event in Laguna Niguel at the Ritz. At that time, I met someone named David Karp, who was just starting a site called Tumblr, and someone named P. Cashmore, who was just starting a site called Mashable, and someone named Andy Cohen, who was just starting a series called Watch What Happens on the web. I mean, it's like you talk about, it felt like the beginnings of a movement now in hindsight. Right. And so I started documenting all of this and doing interviews with all these people because no one was really taking them seriously. Traditional Hollywood wasn't. I mean, Entertainment Tonight wasn't doing interviews with them. Like Hollywood Reporter wasn't even paying attention, or Variety, like all these major entertainment news publishers. But then I was paying attention and they wanted to get heard and seen. And so I would be the person to have conversations with them. And that led me to working with CBS News. And I pitched CBS News and actually a lot of other news networks on what I called like the digital culture reporter. And this is in 2007. You know, I was like, I think there's a beat here. It's not a tech reporter. It's not an entertainment reporter. It's like in between that. And CBS News bit, cbsnews.com. And so I started on the scene with Shira as like a blogger. And I would just do interviews with people that were, you know, that I thought were someone you should pay attention to, or companies and viral video stars at the time who were only either they would get attention from talk shows and morning shows maybe weeks later. Like they would go viral and then they'd be on Jimmy Fallon like a month later. So what I would do is I would do the digital interview. And the TV people didn't have the exclusives on that because they didn't see the value at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'll scoop Ellen, I'll scoop the morning shows. And so as that viral video would blow up, my interview would be right next to them in recommendations on YouTube. So
And
that
so
became a thing.
when did you first start to hear, little
Long
things
story short.
about this Web3 thing? When
Yeah,
did
you're
that
like,
start to
fast
percolate?
forward. Anyway, that led me to starting What's Trending, which is a digital media brand and publisher that I now own. So fast forward then to, in 2018, I started hearing the crypto buzz,
Hmm.
but didn't really fully dive in. And then I think it was, and then in 2022 was when I started taking notice, as Clubhouse emerged and Gary started jumping in and Randy Zuckerberg, I started noticing the people I'd been with in Web 2 throughout my rise in digital video and What's Trending era, started playing around Web 3. They were talking about all these things happening. Gary, of course, was launching VFriends. And so I started paying attention. I still didn't know where I would fit in that. And then what was interesting is that because I'd been in this space for a long time, I already had a Twitter following and I'd been on Twitter for a long time. And so people started doing spaces and I started getting asked to host. And again, it was just, right place, right time, being ready with the skills. And so I realized there was really a lot of value similar to what I had done in Web 2, creator economy, viral video days, in being that host and interviewer for the Web 3 community too, and curator of those types of stories, and like bridging that gap and making it more accessible. And so I started hosting the spaces and also collecting and collecting specifically from founders whose stories I really liked and artists who I thought were really amazing. I for a moment I did I'm trying to profit off of this. Like I'm gonna
Hmm.
get early. I tried that and it was too stressful for me. And I'm like, this is not me.
You
I'm
know,
not that person.
I think it's interesting because I know that I first heard about NFTs on Clubhouse. And I think of all the people I've spoken to, obviously Lady Phoenix, Logic said that he learned about them on Clubhouse from Lady Phoenix as well. I think Clubhouse was sort of a perfect storm of all of these things that came together at the right time. There was this whole NFT thing, there was the pandemic, there
Yeah,
was the fact that I think people were starved for connection,
of course.
and audio is very personal. I also think that it was just sort of like people had all of this time on their hands to really absorb
Yeah,
the information. I mean, I recall rooms on Clubhouse, NFT related rooms with hundreds of people in them for hours, like 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. Unbelievable. I wonder what your take on that is. I feel to some degree that Twitter kind of ate Clubhouse's lunch, but at that time, it was super pivotal and all of these things came together. And I really think that that had a huge effect on getting NFTs, Web3 into the zeitgeist. I wonder what your thoughts on that are.
yeah. It was crazy. Is I was really early on Clubhouse, and then I actually jumped out. Like I didn't have the time because at the time I was hosting a daily afternoon drive radio show. So I was doing audio professionally for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. So the last thing I wanted or needed to do was
Yeah.
be doing more audio after my work. Whereas a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other people, one, that wasn't their profession. They all,
Yes.
there was an aspiration there, right? And a need to connect. I actually needed to do the opposite once I
You
was
need to
done work.
disconnect.
I needed this guy. I needed to go out in nature. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't need to be on technology because I was sitting like this, literally like we are, for hours a day and talking about really difficult issues. So I actually didn't hear about the NFTs. Like you could say I was late. Like I was, I didn't know about the Bored Ape. I didn't know about like all these things. I wasn't as early, the doodles, the cool cats. Like I missed that wave
I see.
of the original ones. So yeah, and I said 2022, that's actually when I dove more in, but 2021 was when I started getting hired and then asked to advise and maybe getting money or an NFT in exchange for my services.
Mm-hmm.
And then I noticed that there was this growing community, and specifically a call I had with Nick Dio, who works with Gary Vaynerchuk. I'll give him credit because he loved the fact when I told him that I was starting to do some stuff and that I thought it was really interesting and a huge opportunity at 2021 December. And I was getting over COVID, a really bad bout of COVID. He said, I have a few NFTs that I want to recommend for you to check out. And I think it could be huge. They're female founded, and these women are going to like really blow up and kill it. And like, and these are ones that Gary loves. It was Woman Rise, Boss Beauties. And then afterwards is when BFF launched. And then I knew Britt and I applied to be a founding BFFer, and then also happened to do, and this is, as I say, universal timing, I happened to do a Spaces about women in Web3, my first one, on the day that BFF launched. So everyone actually thought it was strategic. So people went from the BFF live stream, which if people don't know is a female and non-binary collection and community. People went from that live stream to my Spaces after, which was really interesting. Yeah.
So it all aligned.
It all aligned. And again, it was right place, right time. And me being ready to take that opportunity because I had been in the early creator economy, and you could say this was a new version of that. Right. And so I understood this. I'd been through this before in many ways. So I knew almost how to tap into the opportunity also at another level.
Got it. So I'm glad that you mentioned the creator economy. As someone who you've been in the space for quite some time, you've been creating content for quite some time. How do you think blockchain technology can help with content? I've noticed some shifts in the space. Like Zora now allows you to mint various types of media. It appears like they're working on becoming some sort of a hub for the creator economy in Web3. What are your thoughts as a longtime content creator about all of this?
I think it's a huge opportunity if we can get over the hump of what NFTs were and some of the headlines and where we are now.
Yeah.
Right. And the opportunity is the authenticity of content, where it came from, the owner, and also allowing your community to participate in that, as well as helping the creator and artists have more leverage. So I think it goes, there's a win-win on both sides, from continuing to allow a creator to monetize what continues to build and make more money, the origin creator, to how do we get our audiences in on that, to be in on our success. And then it's not even taking like the platform out, because there's always needs for there's a need for still curators. There's a need for, OpenSea, what they've done is really dumb and shitty, but like,
you're referring to the removal of
royalties. Like I think, for secondary marketplace.
Right.
But I think that they still have power to push someone out there and to help them find an audience. So there will always be a need for that. And is that a middle person? Is that more, what is that? There's a bit of a network amplifier to that. And Zora is one of those too. They can help you with marketing and support and amplification too. There will always be a need for that. But I see that as a huge opportunity. And I see, companies, whether it be like Rug Radio, creating models around media and how they're getting their audience community participating in that success, as well as their contributors. I know NFT media.
NFT now.
They're now the umbrella company is NFT media or some.
I see.
Or not NFT media. It's like media now, or something like that. Like they're even moving away from just being NFTs. How do we take advantage of tokenization and the blockchain to allow everyone to monetize on the content? And digital assets are not just for images and JPEGs. It could be for music. It could be for video. And of course, Latasha and Iman Europe and like what they're doing with their music, and even being able to fund music videos, or people to have ownership of that.
I mean,
so there's a lot of opportunity.
There is a lot of opportunity, but it appears to me anyway, like folks are still figuring it
Oh
all.
yeah, we're
I
still
think
figuring it out.
that there is certainly a convergence of traditional digital media with emerging technologies such as Web3. You mentioned NFT now. They talk a lot about tokenized media. You mentioned rug radio.
They
I
haven't actually done like that's what I'm saying. I haven't seen it. They're talking a
right,
lot about it, or it's
right,
happening. Like maybe it is happening, but that just shows how much there's a disconnect because we wouldn't be able to tell you what they've actually done,
right. I mean, I
possibly.
think I love the thesis that
Yeah,
has
totally.
put forward about tokenized media. I haven't seen it yet. I
No,
have I have a now pass, which means, hey, I'm bullish. I would love to see
me
what
too.
tokenized media looks like. I recently came upon a site that it's podcasts, all podcasts, but they've all been minted on the blockchain, which I think is fascinating. But I do think that there is that monetization. And when you compare and contrast that with the fact that traditional media is struggling and realizes that they have to change in the face of this burgeoning creator economy, when you find out that the majority of Gen Z gets their news from TikTok, it's kind of like, okay, what does that mean? And so I would love for you to share more on where you think Web3 comes into that.
that's an issue because guess what? No one is monetizing on TikTok.
Hmm.
So while as a
Right.
news publisher or a media brand, while I might say there's an audience there, I want to service that audience. But if I'm not making the money back that I'm putting in, how is that a business for me?
Mhm.
And so in the end, then you need to create content there while also thinking about where I'm actually making my money, which you could say could spread a business thin and be difficult. And so that now they're bringing up TikTok shopping, which that's the thing. I mean, listen, CNET, how they've made money is through CNET recommends. It was through the products that you could buy, right? A lot of people do the Amazon affiliate. Like TikTok could be that for publishers in a way through shopping.
But where is the monetization for Web3 when it comes to
Well,
content?
yeah, and you could say, so here's the thing. How yeah, if someone's on TikTok, could a company like TikTok incorporate Web3 maybe as an option? So here's what they could do is when I upload a video, the video is actually made on the blockchain, right? And then I could keep it and own it within my wallet. If TikTok, there's a wallet on TikTok, or if someone wanted to inquire about buying that or licensing that it happens on the blockchain. This is a theory, this is a concept, or I could sell pieces, you could say, of my profile or of that video, right? Like for instance, there's been viral video creators that have sold that video, but not within the platform. It was outside of it.
Proof of Culture is brought to you in part by Zora, the place to bring your imagination on chain. Visit Zora.co to get started. Connect, click, create. And now, back to our interview. Do you see any promise in any of the media companies in Web3 who are making a go at it? Which do you feel most bullish about?
I do like what NFT now is doing. They do great content. It's very high quality. I like Decrypt. I like, there's the edge of, but I think they're going to have a hard time because in the end, while they're covering the blockchain, they're still dealing with traditional media models. And
Uh,
even if they are dealing with the blockchain model, it's not going to be big enough to sustain it them because
hmm.
the community is still too small. But I think that I see what Farouk's doing, and that is interesting. But I
What's
wonder,
interesting about what he's doing?
I think that how he has other contributors doing stuff and how they're monetizing is really interesting. And it created a network effect beyond him as a personality. That's
Very true.
intriguing.
Very true. Very
That's
true.
intriguing. And I know he's making sales on that. But again, will he be able to break through beyond that?
I mean,
Right.
that's a really good point because as I think about the NFT projects, the legacy ones that have done well, Cool Cats, Doodles, what I see is a transition to being a mainstream brand, right? So you look at
Yes.
Doodles partnering with Crocs and with Camp and doing IRL experiences. You look at Cool Cats being in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. You look at Pudgy Penguins that are in Walmart.
Yeah, that's a good
There
one.
is
Pudgy
a
Penguins.
there's an interesting transition from, before it was like Web3 is going to change the world. Now it's like, oh, well, maybe we need to be more like like Web2 brands in order to onboard the next million or the next billion. I wonder if you see a similar challenge for Web3 media brands. Do they need to move back towards the legacy media and what they're doing, or can they stay within the realm of Web3 and still achieve quote unquote success?
I think a lot of them are moving into the trend of emerging tech, which is why a lot of them are incorporating AI now.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's not like, as a media company, how you make money. Okay, so say you have the community a fundraising tactic, which some people do it on Patreon, some people case like NPR does it with culls. And then you could say these companies do it through tokens or NFTs, right? That's like the community fundraising. Then there's brand sponsorships and integrations. And then there's also platform rev shares, right? When you distribute the content. And then I guess you could say subscription, and that could go into for some of these NFTs, right? Like a subscription service. The issue is that all of that is really difficult.
Yeah.
Like all of that is really difficult. So I think that, and including for brand sponsorship right now, if Web3 companies don't have money for that, where are you going to get the money? You're going to get it from other emerging industries. And that happens to be AI right now. What's the hot tech industry that has money? Or then you go back into the more traditional tech companies like AWS or Best Buy still. Like, then you need a bridge into like, okay, well, what do traditional tech companies want? Well, they're scared to approach crypto right now, including in the US because of regulation. So you need to broaden out. Well, you want to be niche, you need to broaden out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what a lot of these companies are going to have to do, covering more kind of like tech. A lot of the influencers that I saw on Twitter/X that were covering Web3 are now moving into covering like hacks on X and how to build your following and like almost creator economy hacks.
Interesting.
So like that, because they're seeing that one that helps grow their following more
Mm-hmm.
than covering the other stuff that they used to do. And then also, well, I don't know if that equates to brand sponsorship, but that does equate to maybe more money within the X platform.
Well, you have a show actually on Twitter Spaces, along with, I think, Timepieces and our good friend Manushka, who we
Yes.
know and love.
Yes.
Um, and that is actually, it's one of my favorite pieces of programming. Talk to me about how that came about. I mean, you two together, I know she hasn't been on for the last couple of ones. It seems like she's been busy. I know
Yeah.
she's
Well, that's the
traveling.
thing is like, even I think people that were deep in the space, kind of the, it's not the golden era, the honeymoon phase is gone.
Yeah.
Like, I think people realize like, okay, wow, this is exciting. And there's like a community, and I feel sometimes seen and heard. I mean, not always, but
Mm-hmm.
it feels like we're part of something special. The reality was a lot of people were spending more money than they were making, and they had to get back to like their careers and their jobs
Absolutely.
and what that was. And
Yeah.
so Manushka's one of those. She's an amazing celebrity chef,
Yeah.
right? And so it's great that she understands this innovation. And she's an early adopter, but is that going to pay her bills this second? Right. And that's a reality for a lot of us. That said, yeah, I've known Manushka for a long time. And when we both saw each other in the space, it was like a reunion. And then I was doing the Alpha on Mondays with her and Brian Fanzo. And then we thought, okay, it'd be cool maybe to collaborate with Timepieces because they were doing some collaborative Twitter spaces. And I was in a place where I felt like I had maxed out on my ability to do this alone. And I wanted to do more collaborations, make it more fun,
Mm-hmm.
including during times like in the end, the reality is I don't always monetize that. Like, it's not like we have sponsorships for that. So
Yeah.
at least if I'm going to do it in order to keep learning and keep staying on top of things, let it be fun. Like, let's bring some people together that you like.
It's
And
definitely fun. It has a really refreshing, fun
oh,
vibe to it. I mean, obviously, you and Manushka are fun people, so I think that translates really, really well. What's next for the show?
well, we continue to be live on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, called The Alpha. And yeah, we're just trying to continue growing it and have thoughtful conversations and bring on leaders in the space. And I think also bridge that gap, like not be too in the weeds about it, because in the end, again, like you said, where the industry is headed is not just like deep degen space. I think the power of it is in the understanding of this tech and the powerful nature of it. But then how do you have bigger, broader conversations that create impact?
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to figure out.
Hmm.
While also, I think for me, like having a show like this or having even my newsletter that's weekly allows me to stay updated and in the know. Like it'd be so hard to keep up with everything happening,
Yeah.
but having a show and having just commitments that I've created to stay up to date forces me to do that, which is what I love. That's what I need personally.
Hmm.
And then what happens is the goal for me, I used to create content for content's sake, and I kind of still do, to be honest. But like in the end, if you're not going to be monetizing directly the content, you could say, because the platforms don't let you, it can be difficult to get sponsorship. What are you doing with that helps you monetize? So for me, it's if I could use that to meet new people to get a consulting deal, right? Or to increase my thought leadership and my knowledge so I can get speaking deals. Like you need to understand the end goal and how that fits. So a lot of people might think for me, like I do a lot. For me, though, it's all pieces that are part of the bigger puzzle that I'm creating.
Let's switch gears for a little bit. You've got a very relaxed, casual approach to storytelling. You make people feel very comfortable. You have a way
Oh,
of
thank you.
disarming people. I've seen you moderate quite a few panels. You did my panel at VCon, so yeah.
Oh, yes.
So I
Yeah.
wonder if you could talk a little bit about what shaped your approach to storytelling.
Well, first, the interviewing part of it has always been something I've loved. If anything, I've had to get more into who I am and what's my perspective if I wasn't interviewing someone. And that was
Hmm.
really difficult because my entryway was always through an interview. It was always put a spotlight on someone else, help facilitate them telling their own story. And also, partially, it was, you know, I'm curious. And then also, I actually do see most of the time someone's lights, the possibility in them. So, a lot of times when I'm interviewing someone or telling their story, my entryway is I see you and then getting you to see yourself, like kind of like putting the crumbs down so you can get to the other side, and empowering you around your story. And and I do that whether I know everything about you or not. It's just purely being like, you're a interesting, cool person. Like you're here for a reason. Let's chat. And so that was always how I got into it. And then it became about, well, what is, your perspective? Because I think we went from a time in broadcasting where it was about the host, the interview, the anchor. It's like you didn't really know who that person was. They were facilitating, moderating, curating. But then it became, well, what is your POV? Like,
Right.
why should I listen to you? And I think it forced a lot of us, and some people are still stuck in the traditional way of doing it. And I get it, like unbiased. But then it really became, yeah, like, what is your perspective? I want to hear from a person. So
Yeah.
how do you mix? And then, so then I think my approach shifted where how do I mix who I am with the skills I have and the best practices and bringing quality to the story. And so now I think that there's a bit of when I'm reporting about something like giving the facts. And then also it's why is this important?
Yeah.
Why do I think this is something worthy of your attention or why am I paying attention to it? And
Mhm.
that's where you get a bit more of my personality. And I think that like I'm not a comedian, but I can be a bit like, I don't know, have some sort of weird eccentric humor to what I do sometimes. Or I would say like maybe it's awkward. I'm a bit awkward sometimes, but
You
I,
definitely have your personality comes across. I would say it's a little quirky,
I'm
but
a
it
quirky.
works
That's it.
too.
I'm quirky. And so whether I'm interviewing someone or reporting about something, I have a hard time keeping that back. It just comes out sometimes, whether I like it or not.
It's disarming, but in a good way. Do you know what I mean? If I feel
Yeah.
like if someone sat down with you and they had nerves or were very anxious about it, you almost immediately put them at ease. And you do the same with the
Oh,
audience. So I think,
thank you.
yeah, your experience definitely comes across.
I appreciate it. I think it's for me, it's always been like a Zen practice where I look at when you're interviewing someone, whether there's an audience or not, but particularly when you're live or there's an audience, it's a dance you're doing,
Right.
right? It's like an exercise and you're moving and flowing. And it's very, I think for me, it's spiritual in a way. And I'm holding space, right? And almost like you're creating a emotional regulation for the person you're interviewing as well as everyone in the room. So,
Love that.
you could say there's a bit of like a control factor, but you are saying like, I'm here.
Mhm.
I'm helping you along the way. I'm your interview doula.
You're into.
You know what I mean? But then it could get weird because sometimes I notice I will mirror someone. So either I'm setting the tone and they meet me, but if they don't, because I'm an empath, I'll sometimes move to where they are. And then out of nowhere, I'm like, where was my energy? Or I'll
Mm.
lose it because like I was so trying to connect with them. So that's also been interesting. But, ultimately through the experience, you realize like you set the tone and you need to maintain that.
Yeah, it's a very delicate
Yeah,
balance.
yeah, exactly.
I found that there are times where um, there's a conversation happening on stage, and this could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, but sometimes they lose the audience. Like I saw that a couple of times, I
And
think.
that's hard. It's like it's hard. There's been sometimes I would say where I've literally been in it and I'm like either really tired, like I feel like I'm losing my energy in the interview, or I'm literally thinking about what is the next question. And there's a difference between thinking about that and prepping for that, and then also being like, this is feeling like boring. Like, how do I make this interesting? And that's where I think my quirkiness comes out sometimes, where I'm like, I try to play with it a bit and kind of
Right.
wake people up, right? Like that's where it's like out of nowhere, you're like, wait, I wasn't expecting that.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the causes that you're involved in. You are very involved in representation for the LGBTQ community. You've done some work with a project called, is it Meta Queens or Meta Queen?
Yes, Meta Queens, we're about to launch.
Tell us about your role on that project and what are you hoping to achieve by being involved?
Well, I've been consulting with Build Tomorrow, which is a product studio and like boutique tech product company, but it's focused on impact. They've
Mhm.
done a ton of enterprise and they want to use that knowledge for more impact-based projects. And so that means them jumping on board and supporting others externally or launching their own projects internally. MetaQueens is one of them. So it was something they'd already launched before I jumped on board, and it was a NFT collection to raise money for the LGBTQ plus community, and charities through the theme of drag culture. That's why it's Meta Queen. Each of them like a queen vibe, right? And so when I jumped on board, this was one of the projects that I was given to help. And we are going to make some announcements soon. So my focus was, the fact that they did have a little foundation they started, or an intention, but how do we actually make this into something real and get them involved with the community? So the past few months, it has been, content community building, getting them to learn about where they are right now and where Web3 is, which, you could say it's like, I wish they had launched this maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But we are here, and I still think there is a use case that is valuable for something like this. And so basically, the plan is to launch, and we have a few announcements coming, but it will include getting other queer artists to co-create as part of the collection. We will be announcing a mint platform coming up soon that has done some really cool stuff recently and supports artists. And we will be raising money for 2 charities. I could tell you that, Trans Tech and Outright International.
Trans
So I'm
Tech
super
Social
excited.
by Angelica Ross.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
familiar with them. I know Angelica from
Yes.
way back, way
Yes.
back. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm really excited because she's really into tech, but I don't think she's gotten into this side of things.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I'm interested to, see what happens. And I think that we're also looking to not just be supported by the spaces that are in that community. So it's, typically a project like this, the reality is you have women supporting it and the queer community, right? My hope is to bridge that gap where we will see some of the bros jumping on board too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And supporting. And so part of that is me strategizing, like, where does this live and who's also supporting that to, bridge that gap. Like, we got to get it outside of our bubble. We all know we do the right thing,
Mm-hmm,
or we
mm-hmm.
try to, right? But
Right.
it's like, how do you get the other people to notice?
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
your ethos aligns very much with the ethos of the blockchain. Obviously, you're very much on board with amplifying underrepresented voices in the space. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about why you think diversity is important to the success of Web3.
We got to get everyone involved, right? We have to change systems. If we talk about how the blockchain is creating a new earth, new wave of how we create and how we act and how all this newness, and we're disrupting the old system. But are we?
Right.
Like, what does that actually mean to you? Is it just, and when you even talk about financial, then you need to approach systemic issues, right? Which include racial and gender equity,
Mm-hmm.
right? That needs to be part of the conversation. Of course, to a lot of people, unfortunately, that isn't, because they're privileged, they're blind to it. They're not seeing that as like, it is the conversation. It's the reason why there is the
Right.
financial inequities or the system that there is. So that's why it's important, because in order to create the new world we want to live in, we need to include the people who've been impacted.
Right. Right. Right.
For the
Um,
solution. We can't, like, I could say all the solutions I think, but in the end, like, if you're going to have just like create solutions for women in the workplace, are you going to get a guy to create that? you know, or you
right.
get women. If
Right.
you're going to create like want more black and people of color, and you want them to be part of new financial systems, are you just going to get someone else who's not in that community to create that for them? Like,
Right.
you need to empower, of course, like there's something about allyship and being an accomplice to do that and do the heavy lifting.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's like everyone needs to be part of that conversation, including, and more so, those who've been impacted.
Yeah. 100%.
So
I agree, which is a big part of why I do what I do.
yeah, and by the way, I give you the flowers, and I loved getting to know you, but also, I wish that more people were reporting, like, why is it on Black people or Black queer people and women to be doing talking about that.
Right. Yeah.
So then you're like, hey, notice me. It shouldn't be on you because you're not the one who created the problem.
Exactly. Yeah. But, we do what we can, right?
But
Um,
exactly, we do what we can. But that's why I try to use my own privilege to. I try to be part of the solution as
yeah.
much as I can.
Right.
Yeah, and learn and keep learning, and keep humbling myself. Keep learning, keep humbling. That's
Oh,
it.
there's plenty to learn. There's a ton to learn. I think another thing that I'm aware that is very near and dear to your heart is are mental health issues. And
Yeah,
particularly in Web3, I have seen so many people leave the space just to preserve their mental health. I think we came in and it was a bull market and ETH was way up, almost 4,000. A couple of times it hit,
yeah.
and everybody was making money. People quit their jobs. I can't even remember the amount of "I'm now full time in Web3" tweets that I saw during that time. only to have, we are all aware of the volatile nature of crypto and Web3 in general. And so, now we're in a bear market, and I have seen that inability to make a living affect people's mental health
Yeah.
significantly. Why are you so passionate about that in this space?
I think I'm passionate about it overall because I know what I went through being in Web2 or that creator economy and starting my own company and not having a lot of necessarily like funding and being independent and having the highs and lows, like going viral and having a moment where I popped and then losing it all and then starting from scratch again and building it back up. I mean, this is kind of life, but obviously there's even more volatility, you could say, in the Web3 space. We're feeling it and experiencing it at even a different level because you get very attached. Obviously, when you're seeing things work in your life, as humans, it's easy to get attached to that. I think also there was this feeling because this is this new era, this new frontier. Like there was this idea that wasn't going to go away anytime soon,
Yeah.
or shift. And the shift happened really quickly. And I think people changed their lives very quickly. I mean, even me last year, yeah, I made a bunch of money off of this. It wasn't trading or anything, but through brand deals, speaking, consulting, all that. It was awesome. I was like, if I continue on this rate, this is great. I'm going to be doing really well. Right. Like finally I get to actually save money and like build what my future that I wanted. And that's still possible. It's not impossible, but when it changed, I think for me, it yeah, it hit and it hurt a bit, but also it wasn't too surprising because I've been through this so many times this cycle. For others that maybe haven't been through it, I
Yeah.
think it's really tough. It's really tough, including when you put yourself so out there, aligning with an industry, telling everyone about it. I mean, there's so many layers to it. It's your ego. It's like you start questioning yourself. Did I do
Yes.
the wrong thing? Was I drinking the Kool-Aid? Then your friends are saying something. Then you're hearing the news and media backlash, like layers of it. And it could create a lot of shame and disappointment and ultimately uh, depression. And when you're losing money, that's like the first thing that creates stress is financial stress, as we know,
And
in
yeah.
our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, if we are going to be looking at this as a new wave, like what does that mean in terms of how we approach ourselves and how we are in our behavior in this? And so we need to be integrating an approach to our own mental health and well-being from an individual level, from a company level, from a community level. And that became very clear as I continued in it, but it was more just like a natural progression because I was going through my own personal growth journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I launched my own wellness company during COVID. And then it happened that we started getting asked to do wellness for discords and for communities in Web3. And then we saw an even greater need because of like the nature of it, of the FOMO and how high and low things went. And so, yeah, I think that it's really important. We talk about community. There's so much community, yet everyone's kind of alone in many ways. And like, where are you? Like, do you even know who these people are? They're all kind of anonymous and virtual. There's like so many layers that make it ripe for a breakdown. So that's why I think it's really important because if we're going to create a difference and an impact in brands of tomorrow, my hope is that we have better leadership that is more heart-centric, conscious, ethical, principled leaders, and that we're bringing that into the workplace, into the teams, and all of that. Because then it
Into
impacts
these
what we create
communities
and how
that
we
we've
create it.
created, right?
Yeah, like it impacts everything. Then people feel good. You're not trolling and people aren't like scamming and spamming each other and being hurtful. Like that comes from being hurt. That comes from being lonely. That comes from being depressed and anxious.
Yeah.
So how are we continuing to solve that versus continuing to fuel that fire?
Yeah.
Like
100%.
so.
That was a fantastic answer, by the way. Shira, thank you so much. Last question that I ask all our guests here on Proof of Culture. And let me just thank you again for your time and your thoughtful responses. So great chatting with you. Tell me, what does culture mean to you, Shira?
Culture is the amalgamation of human expression that, when brought together, can create movements that represent where we are as a society, and that can create impact and also can create change.
Girl, that was epic. Are you kidding me? What? That was so good.
I mean, it's basically us being human and coming together as like energies awesome. Wanting different things, and most of the times wanting the same thing, but not knowing how to get there.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Shira. Really, really appreciate your time. That's up there in the top 3.
Yes, I made it. That's winning.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Proof of Culture. Your support really means the world, and you're helping to bring our message to a broader audience. This podcast is written and produced by yours truly. Don't forget, the conversation doesn't end here. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, or any suggestions that you might have. Reach out to me on Twitter at Sean Morson. That's SIANMORSON. And be sure to follow the podcast at proofofcult_pod. Your feedback and engagement really makes a difference and helps us to shape our journey. If you enjoyed today's episode and you found it enlightening, please share it with friends, colleagues, or anyone you know who might be eager to learn more about the cultural landscape in Web3. Your support in spreading the word is invaluable in helping us to grow our community. Our theme songs are A Long Way by Serge Pavkin Music and Titanium by Elysia Beats. Be sure to tune into our next episode where we'll continue to dive deeper into the fascinating facets of culture in Web3. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep cultivating your own proof of culture.